Hello everybody. So hopefully following session 1 you have created a statement, a thesis statement, i.e. you know what your speech is going to be about. You are going to persuade other human beings of your age that something is important in the world, i.e. that we all have a moral duty to stand up against racism. We all have a moral duty to do more to protect our environment. You all have your own statement. You should also have lots of plans, lots of notes. You can't carry on with this session until session 1's done because it's absolutely essential to have all the planning and notes done. But hopefully you've got a table of initial ideas, you've spent some time on the internet, you've got some research, you know a thing or two. I'm going to keep this session short because I think the research from last sessions probably took you a while. So the second part of rhetoric is what they call arrangement. We've covered invention, which was all about coming up with ideas and doing your research. Arrangement is all about taking those initial ideas and putting them into order. Because actually what makes a good speech is how well structured it is, how shaped and ordered the ideas are, not just the ideas themselves. So I'm just going to go through with you how to build and arrange the notes and ideas you should have. There's lots of ways to structure a speech. The one I think is potentially useful comes from what's known as the Rhetorica Areneum, which is a very old book. It comes from the 80s BC, but is still used today as a textbook on the structure and uses of rhetoric. It's incredible, isn't it, to think something's lasted that long. And it basically sets out ideas about how you should order and structure and shape a persuasive speech. And it suggests that there should be 5 parts to it, that your speech should have 5 clear sections. The first one is what's called the exordium, which is about capturing the audience's attention, introducing the topic, but not really getting into your argument yet. The narration is stating what their argument's going to be, setting out your big ideas, if you like. The division, outlining your main points. The proof, giving evidence to support them. This one is particularly important, the refutation. We've done this before, the counter-argument, setting out and challenging the opposing arguments. And then lastly, we have the conclusion, which is summarising and having a kind of urgent tone at the end that people need to take action. Now, what I have done is taken this ancient textbook and these ideas of structure and shaped them into something which hopefully will be nice and straightforward for you to follow. And what I've tried to do is to create a structure which is very similar to the structure of most stories. You'll be used to this sort of diagram, the idea that in a story, you introduce the character, you create the setting, you have the action, things happening that creates action, a climax, and then you have a resolution where things start to come back to normal, and then we have an ending. And we can use this very similar structure of this kind of pyramid structure to build a speech. So I would suggest that the opening of your speech is all about character, i.e. your character, the ethos opening, selling yourself as an appealing, selling yourself as somebody who can be trusted and has got something worthwhile to listen to. The setting then is logos, where you sort of set the topic and contextualise it. Give some history, share some facts. So if you're doing a speech about we have a moral duty to stand against racism, this is your chance to outline some of the issues around racism historically and some of the things that have happened that have meant that black people and people of ethnic minorities have been subjected to terrible treatment. Or if you were doing your speech about the environment, it's a chance to talk a little bit about, the Industrial Revolution and the ways in which the urbanisation of society has led to damage to the environment. So paragraph 1 is all about yourself, selling yourself, creating an appealing impression. You will still mention the topic, but it's more about getting yourself across, whereas the second one is really about showing your knowledge of the topic you're going to talk about. The rising action then is a bit of logos, a bit of pathos thrown in there as well, explaining why the topic is so important. This is the one where you can be a little bit appealing to your audience's sense of fear, saying what's going to happen if things don't change, setting out how dire things are at the moment. So if you're delivering a speech about why we should do more to protect the environment, you can explain some facts about the current issues with the environment, the fact of how much damage is being done and what horrors lay in store for us if that doesn't change. The climax, then, the pathos. I suggest this bit is maybe just one sentence, that this section is incredibly short, where you have a really compelling emotional point. Picture, if you were saying we need to do more to protect our environment, and you were talking particularly about the extinction of species, this is the bit where you could say, if we don't act now, in 10 years' time, there will be no lions, no tigers, no rhinos in the world. That really powerful moment, which is short and impactful. Maybe using a really powerful rhetorical figure like Anna Diplosis or something to give it that real power. The falling action, then, this is when I suggest you shift the tone to positive. The rising action is a bit doom and gloom, these are all the bad things, but then we can say the positive and hopeful things. If we change, this is what we can achieve. Your voice matters and we all have a role to play, so we can be a bit more aspirational. And then the ending, again, I think the ending needs to be short, and it's your chance to set out what you want your audience to actually do. If we're going to achieve a change from a world which is being destroyed by pollution, and we want to shift to a world which is in which nature is restored, what do you want your audience to actually do? So it gives us a really clear structure of how we build it, and we have a minimum of 1 paragraph per section, although some sections will be longer than others. I've put a note here that we must include the counter-argument structure within at least one section. That bit where we say, of course there are those who believe that, but this is a specious argument because, where we challenge the opposite view. Okay, so I would suggest that a good thing to do with all of your research and notes is to flesh it out into a plan that follows the structure. So first of all, that you plan what impression of yourself you want to create. Now, for me, for my task, my speech, where I'm going to argue we need to do more to end child labour, I want to introduce myself as being lucky. I want to recognise my privileged position in the world. That I am someone who was born in the UK, who had an education and has been able to achieve my goal, my ambition of a career as a teacher. I wasn't forced to work in a terrible factory. I went to school and I learnt stuff. But at the same time, I care about others. Just because I was lucky, I want everyone to have the same opportunities, regardless of where they happen to be born. So that'll be my first paragraph, talking about myself, recognising my privileged position as an educated person born in the UK, but also saying that, this isn't the same for everybody. Some people don't have this chance, and I think I really want that to change. Obviously, I would write it much better than that. I'd use persuasive devices and all those things, but that's just an outline, a skeleton of the sort of things I'd say. Now, obviously, child labour used to be common in the UK. If we go back to Dickensian times, the Victorian period, loads of children worked, but it was eliminated because it's grossly unfair and it's wrong. And I can obviously talk about the fact that the number of children currently working in child labour. I can potentially use a quotation. I can find a quotation online from somebody who's talked about the situation of child labour. For my rising action, why is the topic so important? This is obviously the bit where I'm going to be a bit more emotive, where I'm going to talk about childhood is precious. All children deserve education. This is the point where I'm going to talk about those emotional topics. And then my big moment, my big emotional point, I think here as well, I might also talk about bonded labour and the fact that in some countries, children are forced into a form of slavery because they have to work to pay off the debts of their father, or even their grandparents. So I'm going to talk about those kinds of issues in that section. My big climax, I think, my big emotional point is going to be that we benefit from the suffering of children. Every time we buy a cheap item of clothing made by a child in a factory, we benefit from the suffering and exploitation of children. And that's going to be my big emotional point, that actually I don't want to do that. I don't want to buy a top that's been made by a child in a factory. I want children to be at school. Then I'm going to change it to more positive. So obviously, I've been talking, the world is rich. There are plenty of countries, plenty of governments that can do more to help children and end child labour. But also, as an individual, if I make ethical choices, if I choose to buy items that are not made, which is really hard because so many companies are involved in it, but if I actively choose to be ethical and to find the companies that aren't using child labour, I can individually make a difference. And then my ending, what do I want my audience to do? I want them to pressure their MP, to write to their MP, to put pressure on them to actually raise this as an important issue, and I want them to make ethical choices, to try and think about what they buy and whether they are contributing to the problem or helping to solve it. So I've got a real clear sense now. I've got a page full of notes using my triangle diagram back here. I have a page full of notes, not on my screen, but one I've made separately to this lesson, absolutely full of notes of all my research I've done. And now I've got a plan of how I'm going to organise it into an order. So that's what I suggest you do. Once you've got your research, you've got your triangle diagram, draw out this table, get it into some kind of order of what are you going to say when, what facts are you going to use where. So that you've got not just a map of ideas, you've got a systematic plan of what you're going to say at each point. And that is it for today, guys. So thank you very much.